Without objection.
Madam President, later today, President Obama will travel to the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. He will visit with employees and officials there and deliver a speech on his vision for NASA. We've begun to learn the details about some of what the President may be announcing, but so far, nothing has been suggested that alleviates the concerns that I expressed on the floor earlier this week. In fact, I am growing more concerned. I have serious questions about the administration's proposed vision. For example, the President is proposing to rely on a commercial space launch industry that is still in its infancy. Once the space shuttle is retired, a commercial vehicle would be the only American human spaceflight capability for the foreseeable future. Further, we are about to complete the International Space Station and begin the period of scientific research that we've been waiting for. For the past 10 years, we have waited for the space station to be up and going and operable. At the same time that it is now becoming operable, we are beginning to phase out the Space Shuttle program. And that is the only means that we have to deliver crew and cargo to the space station. We are nowhere close to having an alternative to the shuttle, whether government-operated or commercial operation. Congress and the President agree that we should extend the life of the space station to at least 2020. That only makes sense because we've invested $100 billion in this space station. Our partners are international. We have contractual commitments to our partners who have also made huge investments in this space station, and yet now we are looking at stopping our shuttle at the end of this year so that our alternatives are going to be very limited. We must be certain that the space station can be supplied and maintained with the spare parts and equipment it needs to operate for the next 10 years. It may well be that equipment needed to ensure the sustainability of the space station can only be delivered by the space shuttle. I introduced legislation last month to require NASA to have a review of the station components and identify anything that might be needed to be delivered to equip it for its research mission. Of course, NASA could do that review right now without legislation, and I urge General Bolden, the NASA administrator, to undertake such a review, particularly in light of the space shuttle not being extended under the President's proposal. It is still possible that we could extend the time between the shuttle flights to deliver the necessary materials to the station. And that is an option I believe we need to preserve. This is also part of the legislation that I introduced because it would prolong the time that we can put our own astronauts into space with our own vehicle that we know is reliable. That is the key. We don't have to add more into the budget. The budget is already providing for 2 more space shuttles this year, plus one that would be a contingency. And we have this paid for in the budget. If we will just extend these out, it will give us so many more national options that would be in America's best interest. Without a NASA-managed alternative for human access to space, we will be dependent on the Russian Soyuz rockets to take American, European, Japanese, and Canadian crew members to the space station. Today, it is a cost of $56 million per passenger. Now, that price could go up if we end the space shuttles this year. We don't know what the next contract might have, especially when it is realized that we will have no capability and are shutting down our own capabilities at the time that we would be asking for help from the Russians. Of even more concern is the possibility that without a shuttle or other alternative, that any failure of the Soyuz for any period of time could lead the space station to be abandoned. and become an orbiting example of space debris? What if something happened to the Russian program? And what if the commercial industry that is very fledgling doesn't come up with an alternative, or worse yet, what if they go out of business? Well, these are the concerns that the President is not addressing in its budget for NASA, and I hope that he will become more willing to look at the long-term consequences of what he is proposing to do if we are going to retain our leadership position in space, in economics, and in security. These and other concerns have been expressed by a number of other individuals, editorial boards, and organizations over the past days. I would like to insert into the record letters and editorials expressing serious reservations about the President's plan and its adverse impact to our nation's future leadership in space. Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that the letters from which I'm going to read and the editorials be made a part of the record.
Without objection.
I'm going to highlight a number of the key quotes from these documents. Let me start with a letter by three of our nation's renowned astronauts, true American heroes. Neil Armstrong, the first man to set foot on the moon from America. Commander of Apollo 11. James Lovell, commander of Apollo 13, and Eugene Cernan, commander of Apollo 17. In an open letter to the President, these space pioneers state that although some of the President's proposals have merit, the decision to cancel the Constellation program, its Ares 1 and Ares 5 rockets, and the Orion spacecraft is devastating. They say, America's only path to low Earth orbit and the International Space Station will now be subject to an agreement with Russia to purchase space on their Soyuz at a price of over $50 million per seat, with significant increases expected in the near future, until we have the capacity to provide transportation for ourselves. The availability of a commercial transport to orbit as envisioned in the President's proposal cannot be predicted with any certainty, but is likely to take substantially longer and be more expensive than we would hope. It appears that we will have wasted our current $10+ billion investment in the Constellation, and equally important, we will have lost the many years required to recreate the equivalent of what we have now discarded. For the United States, the leading spacefaring nation for nearly half a century, to be without carriage to low Earth orbit and with no human exploration capability to go beyond Earth orbit for an indeterminate time into the future, destines our nation to become one of the second or even third rate in stature. While the President's plan envisages humans traveling away from Earth and perhaps toward Mars at some time in the future, the lack of developed rockets and spacecraft will assure that ability will not be available for many years. Without the skill and experience that actual spacecraft operation provides, the USA is far too likely to be on a downhill slide to mediocrity. America must decide if it wishes to remain a leader in space. If it does, we should institute a program which will give us the very best chance of achieving that goal. That is all from the letter signed by Neil Armstrong, James Lovell, and Eugene Cernan. In another letter to President Obama, 27 space experts, including astronauts, former NASA administrators, and program managers, make the following points. America is faced with a near simultaneous ending of the shuttle program and your recent budget proposal to cancel the Constellation program. This is wrong for our country for many reasons. We are very concerned about America ceding its hard-earned global leadership in space technology to other nations. We are stunned that in a time of economic crisis, this move will force as many as 30,000 irreplaceable engineers and managers out of the space industry. We see our human exploration program, one of the most inspirational tools to promote science, technology, engineering, and math to our young people, being reduced to mediocrity. NASA's human space program has inspired awe and wonder in all ages by pursuing the American tradition of exploring the unknown. We strongly urge you to drop this misguided proposal that forces NASA out of human space operations for the foreseeable future. For those of us who have accepted the risk and dedicated a portion of our lives to the exploration of outer space, this is a terrible decision. America's greatness lies in her people. She will always have men and women willing to ride rockets into the heavens. America's challenge is to match their bravery and acceptance of risk with specific plans and goals worthy of their commitment. NASA must continue at the frontiers of human space exploration in order to develop the technology and set the standards of excellence that will enable commercial space ventures to eventually succeed. Canceling NASA's human space operations after 50 years of unparalleled achievement makes that objective impossible. One of the greatest fears of any generation is not leaving things better for the young people of the next. In the area of human spaceflight, we are about to realize that fear. Your NASA budget proposal raises more questions about our future in space than it answers. That all from the letter that was signed by 27 people who have dedicated their lives to America's space exploration. In an open letter by astronaut Lee Archambault, who was a pilot on Atlantis in 2007 and Discovery in 2009, he says, "As the space program marches closer to its apparent end, NASA's future is in jeopardy more now than perhaps at any time in our history. The shuttle retirement would yield sole access to the International Space Station to Russia for the projected 7-year gap, the U.S. human spaceflight gap. Others argue that commercial alternatives exist to ferry our astronauts to and from the space station. Not quite yet. Our commercial industry is indeed getting closer to attaining the ability to send unmanned spacecraft to the space station as resupply ships. Ultimately, these companies may produce spacecraft safe enough for human travel to low Earth orbit. However, I would not bet the future of the space station on commercial access for crew members happening much sooner, if at all, than 2017, if Orion is capable of flying to the space station. Thus, this option cannot be considered a viable gap filler at this point. Not until Orion or a commercial alternative is indeed ready and capable of transporting our astronauts to and from the space station should we consider retiring the space shuttle. The future of NASA and our manned exploration of space must include flying the shuttle through the gap, whatever it may be." Finally, this week, in an editorial from the Washington Times entitled "Losing It in Space," the editorial from the Times says, "Pity poor NASA. Rather than reaching toward the stars, America's premier scientific organization has settled its sights on studying shrimp schools beneath the Antarctic ice cap and sticky accelerators on Toyotas. Such is the scope of hope and change in President Obama's universe." The editorial goes on to say, in his 2011 budget, the president zeroed out NASA's Constellation project, the package of launch and landing vehicles that were to replace the aging space shuttle fleet to carry Americans into space. This is not a cost-cutting move. The agency is budgeted to receive $19 billion next year, and Mr. Obama wants to throw an additional $6 billion at it over the next 5 years. The hitch is he wants to shift its mission toward climate research and airplane design. Anxious to stay relevant, NASA agreed to research the cause of Toyota's sudden acceleration problem. NASA Administrator Charles Bolden said Thursday that federal money is budgeted for fostering the growth of the commercial space industry, including the development of space taxis. But if the results of the president's stimulus are any indication, Command economic policy is an inefficient generator of jobs. It goes on to say, as NASA's wings are clipped, our competitors soar. The U.S. Space Agency even had to sign a $340 million deal with Russia on April 6th to transport astronauts to the International Space Station through 2014. By then, China intends to conduct an ambitious schedule of flights with its Shenzhou spacecraft. It doesn't take much imagination to envision the day when NASA must pay its Asian competitor large sums for American astronauts to ride into orbit as passengers. Thanks to Mr. Obama, the United States will be dependent on Russia and China for space travel. The editorial goes on. The space program is a great symbol of the American spirit of achievement. The day this nation cedes the conquest of space to others is the day we admit that we have forfeited our competitive exceptionalism. Earth-centric activities like the study of the Antarctic shrimp ecosystem and automobile anomalies should be left to others. A less costly NASA should be relieved of extraneous responsibilities and allowed to retain its core mission, one that no other agency can accomplish, the exploration of space. On behalf of all Americans, Floridians should make certain the President gets the message loud and clear when he hosts a conference about the agency's future on Thursday, today, in the Sunshine State. Let NASA be NASA. That is the editorial from the Washington Times earlier this week. Let me remind my colleagues that the Augustine Committee, which the Obama administration asked to review the nation's human spaceflight activities, used a subtitle for its report, which proposed a set of options for a space program worthy of a great nation. The items I have submitted for the record reflect the thoughts and feelings of many of those who gave us a space program that was worthy of greatness. I believe their words represent a challenge that Congress and the President must meet. Mr. President, in a few hours, President Obama will share the details of his latest vision for our nation's future space program. I still remain hopeful that the President will come away from this visit today with a deeper understanding of what is at stake in our nation's history of space exploration. I renew my offer to work with the President and my congressional colleagues to come up with a plan that makes sense for America. The principles necessary to bridge the gap between the President and Congress have been set forward by the bipartisan legislation that I have introduced and has also been introduced on the House side. All that is needed to align these principles with the President's goals and existing budget realities is a willingness to take the same risks that have been hallmarks of our nation's commitment to space exploration. Madam President, some people would say, you know, we've got to cut the budget somewhere. Why not here? Madam President, the answer is this doesn't cut the budget. The President's proposal does not cut the budget. It increases the budget. It just turns the money over to private companies that are as yet unproven to try to do something that we have already made a $10 billion investment in and cut it off. And when it is cut off, we will lose all that has been gained, the engineering, the science, the research that has gone into this will be lost. Those people will go into other areas. We will not be able to recreate it, but yet we haven't cut the budget a penny. What we have done is squander the capability for America to continue to be the leader of the world in innovation, in creativity, and most certainly in taking the risk to explore the heavens, which have produced so many results in our country. It has produced results from national defense capabilities. We are using satellites to put bombs into windows from miles out so that we will not have collateral damage and hurt innocent people. We learned that by exploring the heavens. We now have Velcro. We have MRIs. We have health benefits that we could never have gotten without the research that we did to go into space. Now we have a $100 billion investment in a space station that will specialize with NIH and other agencies in doing research that cannot be done on the ground because of the microgravity conditions. And yet, we are stopping the capability at the end of this year for Americans to go into space under our own auspices. Madam President, this is not sound policy for our country, and I am urging the President to listen to people like Neil Armstrong and Gene Cernan and Jim Lovell and former administrators that have knowledge that is beyond mine or his about what we can do for the future. We need to rethink the position that is being announced today and remember that America's greatness is dependent on our creativity and our entrepreneurial spirit. And stopping mid-track and turning everything over to private companies that are in their fledgling stage is not the answer. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Arizona.
I ask unanimous consent to extend morning business for up to 10 minutes.
Without objection.